All right, so welcome to today's class. We're going to cover Power Automate 101. And our assumption for this class is that you have zero knowledge on Power Automate. Power Automate is one of the tools in the Power Platform stack. So we've spoke a lot about Power Page and Power Apps, Dataverse in the last few weeks, and then Canvas, model-driven apps. We spoke about Power Pages last week. Today we're going to cover Power Automate. We're going to understand what Power Automate is and what it can be used for. So I'm Foyin, co-founder, Tech Stylers. I also a mentor on the Copilot Studio track. And I've invited Babatunde to join us today on this session. So he will take two of the topics, and then you can follow us on our LinkedIn handles. You will not become an expert after today's class, but you will have enough understanding to do your projects and to grow in your journey as well. So let's get started. Talk about Power Automate. What does Power Automate do, right? Today we're going to learn about the business value of Power Automate and how Power Automate works from a user's perspective. What's the value of Power Automate? Why do we need it? Why do we need to learn it? What's the purpose? Now, there are some common scenarios which are listed on the screen, which you can use Power Automate to achieve. And number one is automating repetitive tasks, right? So for example, you're working and you get an email every time from maybe a system. So let's assume that you are monitoring a particular system. For example, Office 365. You're an Office 365 administrator, right? And you set an alert system there that whenever there is a critical health issue on Exchange, Microsoft Exchange, you want to get notified. So you're getting all of this, and when you get notified, what you want to do then is you want to save that email into a SharePoint folder where not only you, but all of your other team members can see that an email has arrived from Microsoft 365 and there is a critical issue that needs to be resolved. One scenario. Another scenario off the top of my head is every Friday, your team members need to send their weekly reports to you, to you, because you're the one sending it out to your boss to show that this is what everybody has done for the week. But everybody keeps forgetting, and you have to be chasing them. Say, where is your report? Where's your report? Where's your report? And this is a real life scenario when I was working back then in the bank. Send your reports, send your reports. So and then when you get the reports, you now pull everything together and you send the email to your boss. All right, so what can you do in that scenario? You can automate it, right? That's another scenario. Now I'm talking of scenarios for you at your decks. Another scenario is I'm always getting wet. This Lagos weather is so unpredictable. I go out without an umbrella because I didn't know that it's going to rain today. And now I'm drenched on my way back home. What can I do? Power Automate can also answer that question for you. So I'll play back all the scenarios. So the first scenario, what can you do? In that scenario, you can, an admin, you can, rather than you yourself waiting to get that email and then copying that email and paste or copying it, like saving it, save as, and then putting it up in a shared location manually, that can be automated where you don't even have to do anything. Immediately the email arrives in your box, it just goes straight to that shared folder and notifies everybody that there's a severity A issue on Exchange. You need to look at this now. In scenario B, where you're chasing everybody, right? What can you do? What can you do in that scenario? You can set an email, use Power Automate to send a reminder to everybody to say at 4 p.m. on Friday, send a notification to all my team members, tell them that they need to send their reports now to me, right? And if they don't do it, keep sending them notifications every 5 minutes until they get it done. So saves you the hassle of chasing people. And you're always getting wet. What do? Create a Power Automate for yourself that will notify you whenever the weather predicts that it's going to rain at 6 a.m. before you leave the house, and you get that notification to say, oh, Foyin, it's going to rain today. Make sure you go out with your umbrella. So you can see that Power Automate from, and these are very simple examples, so very, very complex examples, but from your everyday life, personal productivity, how can you work more efficiently for yourself, even ensuring that you don't get wet, to team productivity. My team members are always making me chase them for reports. Why? To productivity that now involves you as an administrator monitoring a critical system for your organization. Power Automate can do that. And you can take it a step further and another step further and another step further. But I'll just start with this example. But when you hear repetitive tasks, think Power Automate. When you hear guiding a user through a process, think Power Automate. When you hear connecting with external data sources, like the Copilot guys will know, we spoke about this extensively in our class. You have your agents that you've created, and you want your agents to be an agent, not just a chatbot, right? Which means that I, as a user, I want to use this HR agent to know how many leave days I have left, right? Not just to know the leave policy, but how many days do I have left in my leave? That data does not sit in Dataverse, right? In most organizations, anyway, most standard organizations, they will have an HR system, an HRIS system. So what you want to do is you want to use Power Automate to pull that data from that system and send it to your agents. So your agent knows that, okay, this is Foyin speaking, and Foyin has 7 days of leave left in this year. So when you think of connecting to any external data source, from SAP to Salesforce to Dynamics, which is kind of part of what we're doing, Dynamics to what else? ServiceNow, name it. Power Automate is the answer. And Microsoft currently has over 1,000 plus connectors. And we'll talk about connectors in a bit. Over 1,000 plus connectors that can help you pull data from different sources. And what are these connectors? These connectors are just APIs that are wrapped, right? So when we say API, now what we're just talking about is a way to get data from somewhere to send data to another system. That's what APIs help us to do. Very simple way of saying it. An API helps us to take data from point A to point B, to retrieve data from point A to point B. Different systems. So what Microsoft has done is, rather than having to create a custom API for every system you want to interact with, let's create a connector for you already. So that connector is already created by Microsoft. You don't have to build it from scratch. All you have to do is put in the parameters and you get your data flowing back and forth. So when you think about all of these things, think of data of Power Automate, and then automating desktop-based processes. Desktop-based processes are in a scenario where in your organization, you have a system and it's called desktop flows. You have a system that is not in the cloud, legacy system, old system, right? So all of these APIs that we're talking about is mostly applicable to systems that are in the cloud. So the first thing you say is, okay, you want to get data from this old system. Can it allow us to connect to it through an API? If the person says, no, you can't use APIs. Sometimes it's even for security reasons. Say, no, you can't use API to speak to our system. It's not allowed. If you can't use API to speak to your system, how are we going to get the data of the people that are the leave data that we want to give Foyin and all of our employees? Then you say, okay, let's use a desktop flow for that. So that's showing you the power and the value of Power Automate, right? And this is very critical. So what does it offer? Automation at scale. We've spoken about that. You can automate from you to the entire organization. Seamless and secure integration. I've spoken about that. Integrating one system to another system, connecting from one system to another system. You can do that in a secure way because it works with all of the security, OAuth 2. You can use your service principal. A lot of authentication is in place with these systems as you're pulling data back and forth, right? And it accelerates productivity. Like I said, very simple. You're spending 30 minutes, 1 hour of your time chasing people. You don't need to do that. Power Automate to do that for you. and also helps us to have intelligent automation when we start to bring in and infuse the power of AI into it. Okay, so a simple example here is a purchase order. So this is what PowerAutomate looks like on your right. And this example is being initiated from a Power Apps application, right? So all that we're saying here is a user has put in a request for a purchase order and it wants to send to their manager to approve it, right? So from Power Apps, which we all know and are familiar with, you've created a Power Apps application for purchase order. And I've gone there to put in my details. And then what PowerAutomate does is, instead of saying, oh, who's your manager, right? You don't have to fill your manager in that form, because for all we know, you can put in your friend as your manager, you know. So when you're creating the field, you can say, if you say, oh, manager field, Foyin can put in a friend, and the approval is going to her friend instead of an actual manager in the organization. So with PowerAutomate, you can actually use this get manager connector to get Foyin's manager who has been assigned to her in Active Directory. And then you can start an approval there to say, oh, please approve this purchase order. And you can put in additional details about that and assign it to the manager for Foyin. So whenever Foyin fills the form and clicks on save or submit, Foyin's manager gets a notification to say, we need to approve this purchase order from Foyin. So that's an example of that. This is another example of a conditional flow, a flow with a conditional logic. What's a conditional logic? A conditional logic is an if-else situation. So basically saying, if Foyin's purchase order is 5,000, send it to her manager to approve. If her purchase order is 10,000, send it to her manager's manager to approve, not her manager, or send it to the finance manager. So that's so you are now introducing a conditional logic. If a condition is being met, then this is what this is what I want to happen. And if that condition is not being met, this is also what I want to happen. So this is a simple example of that. And you can see that as we walk through the flow, I know it's a bit tiny, but if it is yes, so they are saying get the manager to approve. If it is yes, and this is the amount, then send to this person to approve the VP. If no, send to another person to approve. And if the purchase order is not approved at all from the first manager, then send an email to Foyin saying, sorry, your purchase order was not approved. So this is a two-step approval. Once my manager approves, then it needs to go to the VP. But if my manager does not approve, it's not even going to go to the VP, it's just going to be disapproved and send me an email. All right. So now in PowerAutomate, and I'm going to go into the PowerAutomate itself. But this is just an overview. So in PowerAutomate, we have three types of flows. In PowerAutomate, we have three types of flows. We have the cloud flows, which can be instant, automated, and scheduled. We have the business process flows and the desktop flows. But today, our focus is going to be on the cloud flows. So by instance, we mean it can be manually triggered by somebody. By automated, we mean something needs to happen for that flow to start. And by scheduled, we mean it needs to happen at a particular time. So that is the definition of these cloud flows. And what the image you have on your right is just the PowerAutomate images. So there are different ways of building a flow. So when we say a flow, we're mostly talking about a cloud flow. If it's a desktop flow, the person will say desktop flow. That is the one I spoke about that you usually use for systems that don't have the ability to call API, that are legacy systems, and you still want to get data in and out of them. And the desktop flow is also Microsoft's robotic process automation as well. But I think there's a slide on that, so we'll talk about that then. So you can create a flow from a template. There's so many templates that Microsoft has created already for us, and we'll see that in a bit. A legacy system is an old system, a system that is very old. That's just the word. That's what we call legacy system. So legacy systems are systems that have been existing for a very, very long time and have been almost impossible to decommission, right? So an example is, organizations, we have some organizations that are startups that are like 3 years old, 5 years old. They have all the new systems, but you have organizations that are 50 years old, maybe 1,000 years old as well, especially when you come abroad. You see some companies established in 17 something. So those systems, those organizations will have, and thank you guys for dropping in thank you, Jeshri, for dropping definition. So those systems will already have information on them way back 50 years ago. They've been working with those systems. And those customers are still your customers. Do you understand? So maybe I'm a supplier of wood. Like I have a friend who is running, their family business is running into the 4th generation now. It was founded by her great-great-grandfather, and they supply wood. And it's gone from her great-grandfather to her grandfather to her father now. She's also into the part of that business. So they will have had customers since that time that the data is on systems. So now, how do we integrate that system that still has valid data with all of these our new modern PC systems? And if it's like a bank, sometimes they'll tell you, you can't touch it though. That system, we can't touch it. Maybe the system was even built with COBOL. There's no COBOL developers again. So now saying that you want to decommission it, which means that you're going to get all of the data out and the processes and everything and move it to a modern system, is a project on its own, which is what a lot of organizations do from time to time. They decommission old systems, they move to a new system. But I said, that we're not ready to decommission it, just leave it there. It has become a principality and power in this organization. But you need the data. So what do? You have to use desktop flow to interact with it like that until the organization gets to a point where they are now ready to do a project to move all of that information into a modern system and decommission it over a period of time. So that's the simple thing about legacy. And to even make it very, very simple, Microsoft Office 2003 or 2000, nobody's using Microsoft Office 2000 anymore. So that's not a legacy system. So as Microsoft stop, and I'm using Microsoft a lot because we're in a Microsoft conversation, but as Microsoft releases new products, they bring all the other products to end of life and they stop supporting it. So before we had link communication, they had Skype for business. So all of those things come to end of life and they stop supporting it. So they expect organizations to move their people and everything out of that into a new system. So when we say a system is out of date, that's what it means. In Microsoft terms, it means they are no longer supporting that system anymore, like SharePoint 2003 or MOS 2007. All of those are old systems, and Microsoft will give you time. So we're decommissioning this system, and extended support is ending at this time. So that means that at that point in time, if there's any problem with that application, the customer is on their own. Like they won't support it in terms of updating the security and all of that to make that system secure, having engineers to support you if you're stuck, all of that is gone. Anyway, a lot of time spent there, but I hope that was helpful about legacy systems and system is going out of date and decommissioning. So these are common terms that you hear as you continue in your in the IT space, and that's what all of that means. All right, so you can create a flow from a template. This just standard what templates means, already done for you. What do you want to achieve? Like this one now, the weather reports that I spoke about. I created one for myself and I just used this about the weather report and modified it a bit. So you want to get weather updates into a Yammer group every day. Just pick it rather than starting from scratch. You can build from a template. You can also use Copilot in PowerAutomate to describe what you want to achieve. rather than building it from scratch. So that's another way to create your flow. So the first way is create from a template. Second way is you can use Copilot if you have it enabled in your environment. So you can use it to build your templates, your flow by describing what you want to do, or you can also use it to support you in troubleshooting and resolution of issues that you have with your flow. All right. Some important concepts that we have in Power Automate that you need to keep in mind is that every flow has two main parts. Now, again, when we say flow, we're talking about cloud flow, not desktop flow. Our focus in today's class is on cloud flows. So when we're talking about cloud flows, you have two parts, a trigger and actions. Something that needs to say, this flow, you need to start. And when the flow starts, what do you want to do with it? Right? For example, I give an example of getting wet, not getting wet, of knowing the weather report, right? And I said I want it to arrive in my box 6 a.m. every morning, right? So can somebody tell me what the trigger is in that example and what the action is? The example I just gave now, what is the trigger in it? What is the action? I've created a flow because I don't want to get wet every day. So I've said every 6 o'clock, I want to get the weather reports. What's the trigger? What's the action? Yes, Nkechi. You can put in the chat. You can also raise your hand.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. I think for me, the trigger would be once the weather, if there will be rain, if the weather will rain, if the weather will be rainy, something like that, why the flow will be remind me to get an umbrella. I don't
Yeah,
know.
sure.
Thank you.
Yes, you are very correct. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone in the chat. So my trigger is 6 a.m. because that's when I want to receive the email or the alerts. 6 a.m. is my trigger. And the action is send me a mail. Send me a mail with the weather reports. So that's in this scenario, that's my trigger and that's my action. So every 6 o'clock, I want to know what the weather report is. And then I get an email. So that's all about trigger and action. So trigger is what do you want to happen? When, on what condition do you want this flow to run, right? And then the action is what do you want it to do? Like I said, for the other example of a severity A issue has come up in Microsoft 365, an email arrives in my box, right? So my trigger is whenever an email arrives from admin, I don't know, or admin at microsoftonline.com, a random example email address. Whenever that type of email and the subject says severity A or critical issue or something, once it gets into my box, just fire it straight into the shared folder for the entire team and send everybody in that team an email to say, you need to come and look at this now. That is the action. So the trigger is if this type of email arrives in my inbox, then forward it to my team folder. That is the action and send everybody an email. All right. And then some other example of actions that we will have as you start to see will be you see loops, you see switch, you see do onto, you see apply to each, you see expressions. And these are terms that you will just get familiar with as you use Power Automate. Power Automate is very interesting. All right. So trigger or run a flow. You can define your trigger based on a few different things. Number one, when something happens, right? We've kind of said that. On a schedule, like my 6 a.m. example, right? When something happens is my example of when an email arrives in my email box from this email address with this subject or with something that says critical or severity A or high importance. That's when something happens, right? And this is also as simple as the approval flow as well. When somebody goes into your Power Apps form and clicks submit, so when the person has clicked submit and that data has now landed in your SharePoint list or your Dataverse list, then send the manager an email to say you have a new purchase order that you need to approve. All right. So that's when something happens. And on a schedule is every 6 a.m. I want to get the weather report in my email. That's based on the schedule. Every 4 p.m., for my previous example, every 4 p.m., send all of my team members a mail and tell them, please, where is your report? And then on a click of a button is another trigger that we can use when there's something that is happening, or there is a physical button that we want to click, or maybe through a mobile app. So you just want to do something, but you don't want it to happen automatically. You want to do it yourself, right? Like on your mobile, within PowerAutomate, you want to manually trigger something. So a random example can be maybe when I get a message, right? Maybe between, because maybe you finish up from work at 5 o'clock, right? But you manage critical systems and you're not completely offline. So you want to know, you want there is whenever there is an event or something has happened and you don't want to forget about it, you want to send yourself a mail so that when you come back to work tomorrow and you're looking through your email, remember that this thing happened and I want to take care of it in the morning. So you can use the Power Automate mobile app for yourself and just press the button and whatever action you want. Oh, I've gotten an SMS from my boss. Okay, I need to work on this tomorrow, but I'm going to forget, right? Because it's not in my email. So you just press that button on your Power Automate mobile app, and what it does is it just sends an email to say message from read text message from your boss tomorrow, something like that. But the whole idea is it's on demand, you know. So that's what Power Automate is. Okay, so it's spoken about scheduled flow. I'll show you this in the flow itself, so we can look at it together. This is on a button. So this is the Power Automate mobile app. This is what it looks like. And this is this placings flows that they've created, you see. So you can click. So this one with the little hand icon is for the clicking of the button. See, post message to Slack. That's another thing. So maybe different channels and you want a sync on it when you click on the button. So this one is when you just tap on and then it carries out the action for you. And then this is an example of desktop flows that is used for, like I said, where there is no predefined API available for that system. And then also robotic automation, you use desktop flows for it. So what's an example? An example is there is a website that has a table of information. So let's assume that you're an analyst, and part of your job is to go on the stocks websites and get information about different companies, what is going on in their stock, what happened last week, what happened this week. So there's a website that is full of information with lots of rows and columns and all of that. And you need to get all of that into maybe an Excel sheet, then do your analysis on that data. So without this kind of desktop flow, what will you be doing now? Can someone give me an example of what you do? You have a website that has 1,000 rows of data, and you need that information to do your analysis in Excel. What can we do? You copy and paste it now. Is there another way of doing it? You start copying it and pasting in Excel, formatting, scroll down on the browser, But with Power Automate Desktop Flow, you can use the feature that will just scrape that data for you. You create a robot that will go there, scrape the data for you, get that data, put it inside Excel for you, maybe even carry out your analysis on your behalf, and then send the reports to you by mail. So those are some of the instances that you can use desktop flow for. So just remember, desktop flow is when there is no API connection, legacy system, security reasons. Sorry, you can't put API on our system. Think desktop flow. Then also think desktop flow when there is a robotic process, and that's just a process that involves so many steps that asking a human being to do it will not be the best use of their time. And you can't, like, the steps are not systematic enough to build a cloud flow for it, right? So, for example, one of the robotic flows I built in the past was you have to go to a system, open command prompts, type in I think a particular code, type in an IP address, then it should get you to another screen. Then you now go there, you now log in. Like, Cloudflow can't do that for you, right? So that's what I mean by a robotic flow, something that a human should be doing, but you now want to automate that process. That's when desktop flow comes in. Okay, I hope that's helpful. Then process mining is a feature that is in Power Automate that just helps you to get more information about where are your bottlenecks in your processes. How can you enhance your customer experience? It just gives more insights around the activities that are going on in your automation. Okay, so let's do a quick knowledge check. And I know that I don't have ABC in the slide, but just imagine that this is option 1. This is A, this is B, and this is C. So can we put our answers in the chat as you read the question? So question 1, which type of Power Automate flow would an end user be most likely to use when they are trying to automate a process of capturing information from a website and entering it into an Excel spreadsheet? See, I already even gave you the answer. What do you use? Yes, thank you. Okay, I'm happy that everybody got that one. Where do you find flow templates? I've not taught you this one yet, but I think we can use idea to answer this one. Where can you find the flow templates? So you find the flow templates. I can see some answers coming as well directly from the Power Automate Builder website. Right?
Hello.
Yes, please. Do you have a question? All right. Then, how can data sources be used with Power Automate? So we say Power Automate can only connect to Microsoft data sources. Is that true? Power Automate can only connect to Microsoft data sources. Power Automate requires to build custom connectors to access external data, and Power Automate can connect to data sources using one of the 1,000 plus pre-built connectors, or by building your own custom connector. 3C. Fantastic. I'm happy, excited. We have all been listening and we got all the answers. So let's quickly look at Power Automate. So how do you get to Power Automate, right? make.powerautomate.com. Option 1 of how to log on to Power Automate. Option 2, if you're already in Power Apps, for example, you come here. Oh, 1 second. You come to this Office 365 launcher, app launcher, and then you can select Power Automate from here as well, right? This is your Power Apps here. This is Power Automate. You can select that. That's how you access your Power Automate. Okay. So we're in Power Automate now. How do we create a cloud flow? All right. So all right, so how can you create a cloud flow? Option 1, if you have Copilot enabled in your environment, right? You will see this here. So you can describe what you want to create. And the best part is there are suggestions for you already, right? To give you an idea. You're like, I don't even know how to use this prompt very well. Okay, no problem. You have 3 options here. Every month, copy all the files from OneDrive folder to another OneDrive folder. Copy all rows from an Excel sheet to another Excel sheet with the click of a button, right? So you can already see this is a scheduled flow because it says every month. You can see this one is an instant flow because it says on the click of a button. And you can see this is what an automated flow because it says when a new item is created in SharePoint, send me an email, right? So some of the options: send an email for every SharePoint list item every day, send an email, da 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 da. So many prompts, right? So let me use one of the prompts here. Let me pick this one. When a new item is created in SharePoint, send me an email. So you can already see my trigger is what? When a new item is created in SharePoint. And my action is what? Send me an email. Very simple. Are you happy with this? Another version do we have? Yeah. When an item is created, this is what I want my flow to do. Get my profile, send an email. All right. So I'm happy with version 1. I'll keep this and continue. And it has already picked me because I'm logged in with my account. So all of that is fine. And I have access to SharePoint. I have access to Office 365. And my flow is created for me. So now, this is the new designer for PowerAutomate. So a lot of us that started with the old designer prefer the old designer, but I'll bear with this one now because of this example. So it's already saying invalid parameter. And why is that? Because we have not told it anything. So we said when an item is created, send an email. When an item is created, where? You have to tell your flow, right? So Copilot can just help you to put the actions and triggers together based on what you've told it. But you now need to tell it specifically where to get that information from. So that's what this is about. So I'll just pick some random sites that we've created. So I have a lot of SharePoint sites I have access to. So I can pick this one, AI for everyone. And then, because I said when an item is created, so it's saying, okay, what list is there? Okay, I can't send you list there. So what can I do? Let me come to this site. And then if you have a list there already, it will find the list. And I know that we spoke extensively about lists in our classes. So we should know what a SharePoint list is. Okay. In the meantime, okay, let me use this one because it's nearer. Okay. For me. So this is my SharePoint site. I'll just come here, create a list for this purpose. And I will select one of the easy ones. So issue tracker, right? Use this template. Let me say demo. Wait. So this is stuff that we've already covered before. That's why I'm not dwelling too much on it. I just need the list for my demo. Okay. So now if I come back here and then I click here, I go to, I think it was cohort 6. And then what's my list name? So we can see it here now, issue tracker demo, right? And that's fine. So the error message is gone now, and then send an email. Who do I want to send an email to? So I'll send it to myself. Let me find myself. Wait. Okay. And then what's the subject? New issue has arrived. Then your text, please treat ASAP. ASAP. All right. That's all. I'm happy enough. My flow is done. I can save it. Yeah, please give your flow a name. So it usually comes with the default name if you come with this route. So I can call this issue tracker flow. All right. So are we ready to test? let's test our flow. I'll just open my email here by the side. It's easy for us to see what we've built together. So we said when a new item is created, send me an email. So I'm going to come here now. And again, of course, this new item can also arrive from your Power Apps as well. So I'll say new item, laptop not working. So we just imagine that this is an IT issue tracker and one of your users is filling your form, and I said the laptop is not working. I need it to be fixed. So I'll save this. Is my flow on? I didn't even check. Okay, it's on, great. So I've created a new issue now. So this is the interface for the flow. So I can check now if my flow has run. Should actually come up here if it did run. So fresh. Okay. Let me try one more. Wi-Fi not working. Why save? All right. So let's give it a second to run. So while that is running behind the scenes, that's one way to create your flow. Another way to create your flow is just to use a template. Yes, that's another way. So from here, you see templates, and then you can pick a template, and they've actually grouped them, so remote work, approval, botting, VCO, so many things. Microsoft has really done a lot to create all these templates for us to make it easy. So you don't really need to start from scratch. So you can pick any one of these templates. So these are the bottom ones. Send myself a reminder in 10 minutes. Very simple instant flow. So we can pick this one and create the flow. So this is one way to create your flow. So once you do that, then you can edit it to see what's behind it. And it, manually trigger a flow and then delay it for 10 minutes and then send a push notification to the mobile. Then the last way you can create your flow is to start from scratch. So maybe all of these templates and Copilot is not really giving you the answer. You just come here, create a flow. And these are different type of flows that we have. So automated is like the one we created now. When something happens, I want this to happen. Instant flow is the button. Scheduled flow is the one based on time. So I'll click on the scheduled flow and say demo flow. So you can tell it to run at what time and when do you want it to start running. So we can say, start running this from today at 11 a.m. and you want it to repeat every. So when I was saying send a reminder to your team members every 5 minutes, that can also work. Or you can say this should run just once a month. So this is also, we usually use this in real life for like things that we want to do. So sometimes we want to do like a batch delete of some records if maybe they've been archived or they've been inactive and want to do once a month so that our data is our storage is not used up. So those are some of the things that you can use to do those type of batch operations that need to happen at a particular time. Sometimes you can use it for syncing. Like there was also another project I did that we want the new users that are created in an Active Directory group to be synced into the Dataverse user table. So this is what we had to use for that. Anyway, so you can create this and all you have is your trigger. So what do you want to happen? 11 a.m. once a month. What do you want to do? Then you can start adding your actions from there. Right. So I'll just turn off the new designer because I'm more used to it. Switch without saving. So meanwhile, our emails have arrived, right? The 2 emails have arrived in the mailbox. So if you come back here to that flow, where is the flow? Let me go back one step. So when you want to access your flows, you just come back to my flows and you see your flow there. Let me open a new tab. Hope I'm not going too fast. All right. So this is the flow that we did for our issue tracker, the automated flow. You can see automated. So, all right, I'll pause for questions before we go to the second part. So these are your flow runs, right? These are your flow runs. So this shows my flow ran 2 times and how long it took to run, and it was successful. So you'll be using this a lot when you start to build your flows and you're trying to troubleshoot to say, oh, what happened? Did my flow run? When was the last run? And Babatunde will be talking about that a bit more when he comes on. So my flow was successful, you can see. Okay, so now back to the reoccurrence. So we can say we want this to happen once a month. We have said 11 a.m. So what do you want to do at that time? Then you can now decide from all of your actions. So this is the trigger. These are the actions. So what do we want to do at that time? We want to send an email. You can also search. You see it. And even in the send Office 365 connector, there are so many actions that can be done. But you will not use everything most of the time, right? But the day you need it, you will find it. So the most common one is send an email, and this is it. Send an email. That was what we used for the issue tracker. And we've seen this before. It's just in the old designer, but exactly the same thing. Who do you want to send an email to? What's the subject? What do you want to see? Right? So what else? We can use let me delete this one. You can also use the approval, which was the one that we saw in the purchase order example. So you want to create a new approval flow, right? So you can do that. And what type of approval do you want to create? So we know that in approval processes, you can have multiple approvers for a process. You can have a situation where everybody must approve. You understand? Maybe you have 2 or 3 people. Maybe it's a very important decision and not one person can approve it. You need 3 people to approve before that decision is made. Especially maybe if it's a monetary decision, an expense, those type of things. You need maybe the CFO, the finance manager, there are approvals like that. So this is what you use. Everybody must approve before this thing can go on to the next step. Then you can use first to approve as well. So everybody has equal authority over these requests. So if Foyin is not around, Rukayas can approve. If Rukayas is not around, Olamide can approve. If Olamide is not around, Babatunde can approve. So far, one of them have approved. We are good to go. So, and then there are now other custom responses type that you can wait. And there's also the sequential approval where one person must approve first, then another. So these are just different type of approval scenarios. But as you start to use the approvals, as you start to use the PowerAutomate and you start to see different scenarios, then you start to understand, okay, what's this one for? What's this one for? How do I use this? What's the best one to use to approve my requests? So I'll do one more example of approval, and then I'll take questions, then we pass it to Babatunde. Babatunde is going to cover error handling because we feel that that's a major part of your automation life. As you start automating, you start seeing a lot of errors. So you just give some common scenarios and some common ways to troubleshoot. And then he will take us a bit of JSON, which is also very important as you start to get data from one source to another source, So, okay. So what I'll do for this is I'll use a manual trigger. Yeah, I'll use a manual trigger for it so that I can show you as well how to test your flow on this. So let's come back here. So I want to create a new flow, and I want it to be an instant flow. So it has the manual trigger. So manually trigger this flow, create. All right. Then what do we want to do? We want to use the approval. It has gone back to the new designer. So one second. So we're going to create an approval. And what type? No. Not everyone must approve. See why I don't like this designer. Let me come back to the one I'm used to. Switch without saving. That's fine. Okay. Approval. First to respond is fine. So what's the title? We'll say approve purchase request and assign it to me. And what's the details? So this is where everything information can come in, right? And then if it's coming from your Power Apps, you have the ability to pull data from your Power Apps application as well into this into this field, or if you have a SharePoint list, you can also pull those items into here. So for example, our issue tracker. Maybe I should use the issue tracker so you can understand what I'm saying to make it less vague. So what I'll do is I'll come back to the issue tracker flow and edit this flow. And then I will stick an approval here. So what I just want to show you how the approval process works. I want to show you how to add dynamic items into your approval. Oh, okay. 1 second. They're determined to make me send feedback. Okay. So let me add an action here. I'll call it approval. It's just the same thing I've done before, right? Create an approval. First to approve, then approve issue. Then I can come here and say title. So please approve request, or please approve resolution of the issue here, or the issue with description, then I can say, oh, come on. So let me give myself space. And then you can pick. So all of these columns you are seeing here are the columns that we have in our SharePoint list. So that's what you're seeing here, right? And then you can pick from it to give your email more information, or your approver more information about whatever it is you're asking them to approve. So that's what this is all about. And you can add as many as you want. So sometimes we so I can also say priority. And then what I can do here is, okay, Microsoft wants us to use the new designer. But what you can do here is you can now name, because when it's coming back to the person will not know what it is. So we said issue description. So they know that whatever value is here is the issue description, and then you can now add the priority here, if it will let me. Okay. 1 second, let me see it. So you now pick the priority value. Now, the reason why I have priority value is because priority is, who can tell us? Why do you have a value here? Priority value. Oh. Why do we have priority value and priority? Okay. Let me switch to the new designer. We have a value because, yes, it shows intensity of the request. But the reason why you now have priority value here is because priority is a choice field. So you need to get the value of that choice field. That's why we have it here. Let's see if the new designer will behave better. Okay. So with description and priority, or with details below. Okay, that's all. And then you can pick all of your variables from your SharePoint list here, like that. And then I can add assigned to here. That's all. Okay, so let me come back here and say issue description. I come back here and say priority value. I come back here and say assigned to. So that's all I need for now. And what else? I think that's all. So let me save. And let us test. I need to, oh, sorry. I'm putting it's in the wrong field. Okay, so details and then assigned to is Foyin. Doesn't search. It's interesting. Okay. So 1 second. Let me pick my email and put it here. So what I'm doing is I'm assigning this approval to myself, right? So let me go back again 1 step so that we're all together. What are we doing? I'm trying to show you the approval action. And what we've done is we have a SharePoint list called issue tracker. The SharePoint list has some fields in it, which is this, right? We have all of these fields in your SharePoint list. These fields are based on whatever you create in your own SharePoint list. And the principle for SharePoint list applies to Dataverse as well. You have a Dataverse table, you have your columns. So what do we want? We want when a new item arrives here, we want it to do what? We want it to carry out a certain action. So in this case, I want it to carry out an approval on the issue that was just created on that item. And my send mail is still there, so I just ignore it for now. So let me save, and then let's test. So what will I do now? I'll come back here, I'll create a new item, right, for a new issue. So I'll say new laptop request again. Then I'll give it a priority of critical, and I'll assign it to, did I pick an assign to? I think so. Okay, let me use another name. Let me say Omolola, right? And then what else did I pick? Description. Okay, let me type here. This laptop is really giving me a tough time. I need a new one. Okay, save. So that's it. So now what should happen is, so let's go back, let's check our flow together and see the run. Refresh this. Integration is on the call. All right, so let's give it a minute while it's running. Okay, so while we're waiting for that to arrive, do we have any questions? Let me take our questions now while we're waiting for the flow to run. It's usually very quick, almost instant. I guess it's because maybe this is a dev environment. That's why it's taking a bit of time.
Question regarding this PowerAutomate flow. So my question goes that if I have a table that I have a Dataverse table that I want to connect it to my app, is it possible for me to use PowerAutomate for that particular data, or I will have to use SharePoint for that particular flow that I want to run? I don't know if that's
I understand what you're saying. Yeah,
yeah.
I understand. Okay, so let's quickly look at the answer to your question, and I'll just show you that.
Okay.
So one of the
Thank
things I
you.
said is, you can use the same principle that I use for SharePoint for any other data source. SharePoint is just an example. So, but what will you do in that case? So let me come back here to flows, and let's create a new flow, automated cloud flow, right? Because you want to use, and let me say Dataverse test. So wait, Control X, skip. I'll do it on the next screen. So my trigger now is from Dataverse, right? So you search for Dataverse. And when you're looking at all of the connectors, you see this little icon. Let me make my screen a little bit bigger. All right. So when you see these little icons, it means that that's a premium connector. Now, there are some connectors that are standard connectors, right? Like SharePoint list. What it means is when with your Office 365 license or Microsoft 365 license, you can use that connector. But the Premium one means that you need to have a Power Apps license or Power Automate license to use it. If you have the standard Microsoft 365 license, you will not be able to use this, right? So, but this should be available to you in your environment since you are using Dataverse. So now, when a new role is added or modified, so you will use this one now, rather than using the when a new item is created in a SharePoint list. You use when a new role is added or modified or deleted in Dataverse. This is your Dataverse icon. So it's asking for authentication, right? So you can use a service principal or OAuth. So OAuth means username and password. Service principal means using clients and app registration. But we won't go into that, but that's another secure way of authenticating by using a service principal where rather than restricting it to username and password, you've created an app registration and you're using a client secret for it. Anyway, so you just select OAuth, which is us. So what do you want here, right? When a new column is added, then what's the name of your table? Okay, there's some tables here. I'll just click the account table. Do you want to limit it? So you have this scope because it's Dataverse, right? And Dataverse works in organization, business units. I'm not sure it covers security, user, but I'm fine. Everybody can see it, so that's fine. I'll use organization. And then some additional things are here, like filter. Is it a particular column that you want when a data is added to for this to be triggered? So additional filtering can be done, but you can ignore all of that if your process is not so complex, right? So I'm happy enough with that. Then what do you want to happen after that? What's your action? Then you can decide email if you want or approval. So this is send email like we did for the list tracker approval. Create an approval. So, and you take it up from there. Does that help? Yeah?
Yes,
Dina?
yes, thank you,
Okay.
ma.
All right, you're welcome. So now let's come back here. So our approval came to, so our flow ran here. Let me take it out one bit. So this is our flow that succeeded. So if you click on it, you can see that it started the approval process, right? And also send the email because I didn't delete that function. So that's fine. But another thing that also happens is with the approval, you get that in Teams, right? You get that in Teams. So all of this needs to be formatted in your flow. But you get that in Teams, so the user can approve directly in Teams, or you also get it by email as well. So the user can also approve from here and put in a comment, approved, submit. So once you use that approval control, you can carry out the approval in two locations directly. The user will be notified in Teams and the user will also be notified in email and can approve from either of those locations. And then after that, you can decide what you want to do next as well, based on your request.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Babatunde. So today I'm going to be taking you around error handling and JSON in PowerAutomate. So, and I'll explain why it's important to understand this. So first of all, error handling. Foyin already kind of explained, walked us through PowerAutomate today. So it's also important, like for error handling on it's not just in Power Automate. It's a general programming concept, which is there are times where you could have some errors. Like, of course, I'm sure you guys would have probably logged into a website and you are seeing an error showing up or something. So it's not just in Power Automate where you can have errors. It's a general programming concept. So also in Power Automate, there could be cases where for one reason or the other, your Power Automate flow is failing. So it could be because of some syntax errors or some actions that you are putting, or maybe the endpoint, the API that you're trying to call is not just available at that point, or it could be for different reasons. However, as a developer, you need to kind of anticipate those kind of error and try to undo them in the sense that when those error occur, you need to have some fallback mechanism to so that your flow can still probably continue, because like Power Automate, the way it works is it works sequentially, right? So it goes from one step to the other to the next and to the next, right? So just like the one for in displayed now. So if, for example, that's part of create an approval or whatever field, it wouldn't proceed to the next stage. So in that case, it means if one action fails, every other thing that needs to be done will probably not be done. And in some cases, you could have, I mean, in some cases, it might be valid that um, that particular one that you're trying to, that failed should not proceed after that, right? But in some other cases, it is important that, like, even if it fails, we can proceed to the next one and then take the other action. Maybe that particular action might not be, should I say, not so important, or even if it's important, there could be some, okay, if this fails, then okay, go and try this other option. That's why error handling is important. So error handling is a programming practice used to manage and respond to errors or unexpected situation that occurs while a program is running. So that's why I said it's not just in Power Automate now, it's just like a general programming concept, because I know some of you guys might eventually, even from Power platform, might still go into writing maybe some other code, JavaScript and the rest. So it's important to kind of understand ourselves going from low code to pro code. So now you said instead of letting the program crash or behave unpredictable, error handling allows you to anticipate potential problems and define how you should react, which I already explained. So why is it important? So one of the reasons why error handling is important is for stability and user experience. So it improves the stability of your Power Automate. So I mean, it's more stable in the sense that it's not just failing one day and then the other time it's not working. The other time it works. Today it's not working, right? So it's more stable because you've anticipated, the potential errors that can occur, and you have given it, I have told it, okay, if this happens, then do this, and then it also improves the user experience, because user experience is very important to when you are building your applications. So if it's failing today and it's working at the other time, then users might be discouraged in using that particular application because they are not sure when it's going to fail or when it's going to work. So it also helps you to debug and log issues more effectively. So you can easily debug and log those issues that have occurred. You can kind of create a log to kind of record the errors that has actually occurred. And it also allows for recovery from an unexpected condition. So in case there is an unexpected error, it kind of helps you to recover, and you can then proceed to the next actions rather than altering the whole Power Automate flow. Then it prevents flow failures from stopping critical processes. Of course, like when you have some critical processes that you have built with your Power Automate flows, rather than it's just failing and then not proceeding to take those actions, when you handle the error very well, it allows you to still be able to proceed uh, with other actions like I explained earlier, and it improves maintainability, which means it's easy to maintain when you've handled your errors. So you are not just going there to your Power Automate every single day to go and check, like, okay, it failed today, and then they are calling you as a developer, okay, the flow is failing, and you're going there again. Why is it failing? So it's easy to maintain because you've kind of handled the error. So it's less work for you when you kind of handle the errors as well. So the other part I'm going to be talking about today is JSON. I believe you guys, some of you might have heard about JSON, or if you have not, so it's JavaScript object notation. So it's a lightweight text-based data format used to represent structured data. So it's one of the most used way of representing data, in programming recently. So initially, I mean, it's still being used, which is like XML, but JSON is much more readable. And everything you have been working with in Power Apps and Power Automate, it is very, very important for you to understand JSON. So if you understand JSON very well, you'll be very good with Power Automate. It will help you understand even the errors, the outputs coming in, and all of that. And it will also help you to even Power Apps. So most of the functions that you are also writing in Power Apps, when you understand JSON and you go back to Power Apps, you understand the structure of those Power effects even much more. So it is widely used in APIs and modern apps. Like I said, most of the modern applications now, they use JSON, to represent their data. Yeah, so what are the valid data types? So we have string. So string is just a text, like it could be your name, your address, and all of that. Number is, it could be your in form of like your age, it could be whole number, it could be numbers with decimals and all of that. Objects, I'll explain objects. I think it's more explanatory when I sort of show what it looks like. And array, so array is more like um set of data, set of related data in a particular structure. So it could have array of objects, it could be array of string. So I can have array of the names of everybody in this class, for example. Everything could be in a single array. All of that as well we'll understand better when we get into the lessons. Then Boolean is just true or false, 1 or 0. If you did computer science, you would understand better. So is either on or off, 1 or 0, true or false, right? So you can use those ones to represent a statement that can have only two outcomes, either true or false. Then null means like it's empty, it has no value. So those are the options we have in JSON as well. So I'll share my screen now just to show you starting from the error. And so I've kind of just built, zoom in. I think my screen is yeah, sorry. Okay, so I've kind of built this test just to kind of demo the error handling mechanism and how you can also apply. I mean, depending on your use case or your scenarios, so use case might be different, but understanding the concept is what is kind of more important at this point. So I've built this simple flow which allows you to trigger a flow manually, upload a file. I mean, search for a particular file from a particular document library. You put the file name, and then it checks if that file exists in that document library on SharePoint. If the file exists, it sends that file to you on your via email. And if it doesn't, you get an email as well that it's failed, like you can't find the file, right? And then it logs the error message on a SharePoint list saying that so person tried to retrieve this file, but it was not found and stuff like that. So that's just a simple flow. So like I said, your scenario might be different. Yours might be a case of connecting to a Dataverse or whatever, you're taking a different action, but what is more important is understanding the concepts. So let me kind of demo the two scenarios, then I'll go over the flow and then I'll explain how each action works. So for example, if I put in just a random file name and I run this flow, so and this can also, I'm just triggering this from Power Automate directly, but it could also be triggered from anywhere. It could be from an automated flow. It could be triggered from Power Apps as well, or whatever your trigger is, error handling can still apply. Now, so I tried to search for the file, but the file was not found, and I got a mail now that this file name that I searched for was not found, because here is my document library. Let me see if I can. So here is my document library. I only have these two files. So, I mean, the file could be much more than this, but if I'm searching for the file, whatever file name I've imputed should be inside this document library. So which means any other name that I type that is none of these two or any other file name that exists in the document library, the flow would fail. But in order not to just make it fail and then the user is not sure what's happening or why is this failing and all of that, then it's important to kind of handle the error, because ideally, if what would have happened is it would have just failed and I would have just seen that, okay, this failed, but I'm not sure what happened. I won't get a notification like I did here that, okay, it was the file that was not found. So that's why error handling is important, right? So it helps kind of improves the user experience. The user knows what is going on at that point. So if I put, say, test.pdf, which is the file that exists in that document library now, and I run again. So this runs, and let's see. Okay, so here now I can see the new one that came in now. It says the file was found and kindly find attached. Now it sent across the file that I searched for. He sent it to my email. So now you see that in both cases the flow succeeded. But if we go into the flow history, we'll see that the initial one must have failed at some point. So which is at this point, you'll see that this actually failed. And what would have happened is it would have stopped at this point without proceeding, and the user would probably have no idea why it failed or what is happening. But because we've kind of handled the error, right, it's then proceeds to send an email to the person to say, okay, because this failed, this is why this failed, and hi, so, and he sent me that email. So how did we achieve it? So let's go through it one after the other. So the first thing we have here is the trigger, which is the trigger for my flow, and then I have the inputs, which is the file name, which is when I run the flow, you see it's request that I put in the file name, right? So that's because I have this input. So it's any user that runs that flow, it will request them to put in the file name. So okay, I'll come back to the variables later. But what is happening here is this is like the main action, which is going to get the file. So there's an action on SharePoint called get file using content, get file content using path. And what this does is it tries to go get the content of a file from a particular document library, and you can then do whatever you want with that content. You can maybe you want to create a new file in another library, or you want to send it as an email like we did here, or whatever you need to do with it. So this compose was just to sort of put in the concatenate. So I just intentionally added this, which is to sort of slightly go through like expressions, because I could have easily put in the file path here. So these are also expressions on Power Automate, right? Which can allow you, just like it's very similar to Power Apps. I'm sure you guys have done Power Apps already. So the way you have like formulas and power apps to perform different actions is the same way you have different expressions, here, and we have a whole lot of them depending on your requirements at each point, right? So now what this one does is it concatenates two or more strings together. So what this is doing is it's concatenating the name of the document type, which is Power Platform documents, and then picking the text that I imputed here, which is the file name, concatenating them. So which means whenever I impute this, let me just duplicate this so we can see from the flow history how it actually works. Okay, so in this case, if I come here, I'll see this is the file name, this is the flow history of the one I ran first, this is the file name that I imputed. So what happens here is it goes into this compose and concatenates this name of my document type, which is Power Platform documents, which we have here, right? It concatenates it with the file name that I've typed in manually here. And then it tries to get the file using the path. So, but then when it goes to this path, it says not found because there is no file with this particular name there. So at that point, the flow is bound to fail, which is exactly what happened here. So this flow failed, and you can see, so different actions as well, just to understand PowerAutomate better is, when you see this green check, it means that that particular action was successful. And when you see this red, it means that action failed. And when you see this X, this gray X, it means that action was skipped. That means it never ran. So, and this is what would happen ideally, right? Flow also runs sequentially, which means it runs each actions as they are arranged. So manual trigger, this variable, then compose. So it keeps going one step after the other. So if it gets to a particular point and it fails, ideally its first instinct is it doesn't proceed to the next action, which is exactly why these other ones were skipped, right? These other ones did not run at all. However, and it would have actually ended here if we didn't have error handling in place, right? But then we will see that after skipping this, it went ahead to the next one to now run this particular flow and send an email, and then it runs this other action as well, which is create item. So what also happens is the part I didn't show is if I so the final part I was also trying to explain, which is this one, which is what creates items, which is this create item. So what happens here is after everything has happened, whether it failed or it was successful, we are also kind of creating a log here to say and the description of what happened. So you can see that this particular file name that I requested was requested and was not found, and the status was that that particular one failed, right? And then this particular one is saying it was retrieved by its sole person and it was a success. So here now we can also have like a log where we can track what is happening, who is doing what, and what's actually happening within the flow, right? So we can always go back here, especially for like you as a developer, you can always reference this to see what is actually failing. Are the users doing something wrongly? Is there an improvement you need to make on that particular Power Automate flow? So which is why logging your error is also quite important. So going back going back to how we got here, right? So the first part, which is I explained already, is the manual create variable manual trigger, right? So this other one was initialize variables. So variables are a way to kind of temporarily store data, and variables are not just in Power Apps or Power Automate. I probably believe you'd have done it in Power Apps as well, but they are not just, they are generally used in programming. So whether you're writing JavaScript, C# or whatever, variables are applicable as well. So and what they do is they allow you to kind of temporarily store values, right? So that you can reuse them for whatever purposes. So here now, and within your program or within your flow or whatever, you can update those values. You can update the variable values. So that's why variables are also quite important. So what we are doing here is we are initializing variables, and yeah. So and we'll probably get into this the type of variable more when we get into the JSON part, so you can understand more. But these are the different types of variable you can initialize, and I think I kind of explained on this one, like boolean, which is true or false, integer, which are numbers, floats are numbers with decimals, string are text, objects. We'll explain that even much more later, and then array as well. So now, but both of these are strings. Status and is also a string. So this is just to store both the details that is being stored here, yeah, on this description, and the status, which is whether either failed uh, or success, right? So now what I've added here is a scope. So if you add an action, you see an option called scope. So scope they actually are not actions that does anything per se, right? They just help you to kind of group some related actions within your Power Automate. So which means unlike the way you are initializing variable or you are composing or you are sending emails, they're actually not doing anything. All they help you to do is you have some set of related actions, right? And then you want to group all of them together within a particular flow. So that's what scopes are. So you can say that within a scope, you can now add your own actions. You see that if I check any other action, there is no other action where I can add other actions in it. Only scope allows you to do that. So you can add actions and you can put in whatever you need to put in, and you can have multiple actions just like we have here. So this try, for example, has all these actions, and you can even have much more than this. So the first action, which is compose, so compose can be used for different purposes, right? So they are kind of similar to variables where you can store your values, where you can temporarily store your values, right? But one advantage they also have is that for a string, if I'm initializing a variable, whatever data type I've selected, for example, if I initialize this as Boolean and it's expecting true or false, if I put anything outside of true or false, it's going to fail. If I initialize this as an integer and I put, which is expecting the number, and then I put in a string, that action will fail. But for compose, it doesn't necessarily have a data type that is requested. So it kind of adjusts to whatever data type you supply to it. So if it's a string, it accepts it. If it's an object, if it's an array, if it's a Boolean, it automatically just adjusts itself to that that data type. So one of the uses, which is what I did here, is to kind of, first of all, store your value, right? So sometimes there are some actions that you are using where you want to see, especially when you are trying to troubleshoot as a developer, right? You want to see the output of what is happening within your flow. So let's say you are trying to build a flow and it's failing. You are not sure what the value you are supplying is or why it's failing. So compose now, you can see the output of that value. So for example, when we concatenated this with the value name, when I come to the flow history, I can see what the output kind of looks like before I then supply it here, right? So in this case, it's a string. In another case, it could be an object, it could be an array, it could be anything. So it automatically just allows you to, store that value and then you can reuse it. So this compose, for example, I can now reference it anywhere else. So let's say this value that I've supplied in here, I want to reuse it somewhere else. I can come here and put it like, if I search for, so you can see this compose now, you can see it from dynamic content. So dynamic contents as well are values that are from the previous actions. So if I come here, for example, so you can kind of dynamically see options that are coming from any of the previous actions, right? So if I go to the next one, now you see that when I come here, I can see outputs when I come to this particular action. If I go to the action that has outputs, I won't see output as part of the dynamic content because it's not any of the previous actions. So anything you see in your dynamic content has to be a value that is coming from a previous action. So now coming here, we've kind of done our concatenate, and then we are getting the file content using the path. And then we have the option to say, okay, once you have gotten that file, send me an email. So it's going to send an email to the email of the user that initiated that particular flow. In some other cases, it could be if you are initiating it from Power Apps as well, it could be the same. If it's an automated flow, maybe the person that created an item or whatever the trigger is, you can also send an email to them. And then this is the body of our email as well. And then this is the name of the file and the content of the file, which is coming from this, get file contents here. And we can see the file contents, so which is why we have that file attached in that email that I showed earlier. And then we are now setting the variable to say, okay, what is the details? So file, then the name of the file was retrieved by so person. And then we have this other status that we are also setting. So, we had initialized the variable here and it's currently empty. Now we are setting variable is more like we are updating the value of that variable. So here now we are updating the details to this value, and then we are updating the status to this, to success. So because once it's able to get this file successfully and it sends this email, then it means that that action was a success. So you can say that this was, can even say successfully retrieved or something like that. Right? And then we set the status to success. Now, like I said, so what we now had to do again was to say, we now created another scope, right? And you see that there's a little icon here. So when you see this icon, it means that there's a configure run after. So there's an option when you click on these three dots here for any of the actions, you always see an option called configure run after. So the configure run after allows you to, it's one of the important things you need to note when you are creating error handling for your Power Automate. So it allows you to run the next actions based on the previous action, based on the output of the previous action. So whether it was a success or it failed or it was skipped and all of that. So now if I do this, if I uncheck this, so what I did here was to say, okay, don't just run it when it's successful. I want it to run when it has failed or when it has skipped or it has timed out, right? And then proceed. Now, if I turn it back to by default, so by default, if you check any of your Power Automate, this is what will be checked. So if you go to any of the other previous actions, you see that it will be successful. That is when the previous action is successful. That's the only time that the next one should run, which is what is happening here. So if you go back to this one, we'll see that because this is saying when this is successful, this is why, if you remember the other flow that failed, this is why the other actions did not run, because this one has failed. So this next one will not run. And because this one is also skipped, this one will also be skipped. This one will also be skipped. Now, let's do a test. So I've changed this back from all these other ones that I checked back to a successful, which is the default behavior. If I run this now, here is what will happen when that fails. So let me put another invalid name and run the flow. Okay, there is a configure run after for the last one as well. So let me remove that. So you see that in this case, the flow failed, even though it's the same action that we performed previously. But in this case, because we did not configure our configure run after, right? What would happen is the flow will stop at this point. So it means that because this has failed, every other subsequent actions will also be automatically skipped. So initially, it was running this particular one, right? And running this other one. But because we have removed that configure run after, this is what would happen. So in this case, if the user is running the flow, especially when it's not like a manual trigger like this one, it's coming from Power Apps or wherever, the user is not aware of what is happening. They are just saying, okay, this is not working, right? So it could be an automated one as well, and they feel like, okay, maybe it's supposed to send something, a report out every day, right? And then they are saying, I'm not getting this email, blah, blah, blah. So you are not sure what is happening, which goes back to like the maintainability that we are talking about earlier, which is now they will have to be calling you as the developer every time and saying, oh, this our flow is not running, what's happening? You have to go back and check again what is happening every single time. But if you had handled the error very well, at least they can kind of see the reason why that flow is failing. So it is due to this or due to that, or the file was not found, or whatever the error message is, right? So that's why this is important. So let's go back to how was originally configured. So what we did here was to say, okay, even if this particular action fails, so which is why we kind of grouped these actions all together as well in a scope. So which is why scope is also important when you are um, building your error handling. So you can kind of group all the related actions together. So which means when any of these actions fail, not just this get file content, for example, if let's say the send email fail for whatever reason, then it's still going to go to this next one, which is the catch, right? So what we have done here is to now say, okay, configure run after. If we go here again, configure run after. So we don't want it to run when it is successful. So this try catch finally is also a programming concept, which is try this particular action, right? Now, if you try this action and for whatever reason it fails, then this is what you should check again. Check this error message, or log this error message, or do this particular thing, right? And then finally now means that after all said and done, whether it was success or it was a failure, then do this particular thing. So which is more like logging it. So that's like the one we did earlier, which is whether it was a success or it was a failure, it still kind of logs the um the output anyways. So that's why we have like this try catch finally. So in case you are also getting to maybe writing JavaScript and so on, you are also saying that concept. So you kind of understand where we are coming from. So now going back here, we say configure run after, and then we are saying don't run when this is successful, because we want to just use this to catch only when there's an error. So it's only when this has failed, where this action, which is this try, when it has failed, when it is skipped, or when it has timed out, right? Those are the only times that you should come here. So at that point, go and send an email to the person that this flow failed, file not found, and then it sets a variable to say this that was requested by this particular person was not found, and then status has failed. So these variables now are now what we are using to go in our finally to now say after everything, whether this is try is when it's everything is successful here, catch when it fails. Either of the case, you still need to come back here to now log that error. So now see where our variable comes in. So the details that we have imputed here, which we initialized, and then we are setting in both of the cases, which is when it is try. So we are setting details and status here to different values anyways. We are also setting them here. So depending on which of the action is successful, then it kind of comes here to log the details, whatever value is in the details and whatever value is in the status. So here as well, we are now saying, okay, we are now going to configure run after here to say this should run whether this was successful or this was failed or this has skipped or timeout, because in a case where this is successful, this will be skipped. So which is why we need to also check this option, which is skipped, right? So this can be successful, which is this card can be successful when this first one fails. The first one fails, this is successful. The first one is successful, this one will be skipped. So in the case where this is skipped, we still want it either way, want our catch to run, which is we still want to log the error or whatever it is. We want to log the message. So that is why we are having this. So if we go back here again now and run it, it should behave correctly. So we have run that now. So at that point, this has failed, this is skipped, and it has logged the error. I've gotten the mail that this was not found, And if I rerun it again using a valid file name, let's say I use the dummy.pdf and I run this. So this is successful now. You see that when this is successful, this particular one is skipped. It doesn't go to this particular catch. It just goes straight to the finally and then logs the error, logs the message to say this file is found, and I can see my file in my attachments, and I can see the log of the error here. I can see that, this was successful, this was not found. So that's more or less a simple way to undo your errors. So in that case, you won't be having so many failed flows. So you can see like this one now that failed, like when we were testing, right? Instead of you having those failed, because you've kind of undid your errors correctly, it kind of gives you an idea of what is happening in the flow. So you have anticipated that, okay, this can happen. There are times where it may not be able to find the file, like in this our use case, right? It could be a different use case, it might be something else, but whatever it is, you just anticipate like what are the potential errors that can come out of this particular flow, and then look for ways to undo them. So I don't know if anyone has any questions, or I might have been talking all along. Are there questions? Are we confused? There. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Thanks for that. So that would take us to Jason. So, like I mentioned earlier, so Jason is JavaScript's object notation, right? And this is very important for everyone who is a developer, whether you are a low code or pro code developer, right? Because it's a way that data is being represented in most APIs today. And especially if you're working with PowerAutomate, you see that everything that we have been doing today, when I explain JSON and we go back to them, and if you go back to the Power Apps classes that you have been having as well, you see that most of the stuff that you have been talking about actually has a lot to do with JSON, right? So where do we start? Okay, so now what I've done also here to save time was to kind of create a simple flow that is connecting to an API and another one that is connecting to the connector for Office 365 users. So let me just go back a step. So essentially, okay, let me even start with like the ones that we've kind of the one we just ran, right? And you see how JSON kind of comes in. Let's check this last flow that we ran. So if you come here, you'll see that this output is, so you see everything that we are seeing here, they are all in JSON formats. And what all of this is telling us is that, okay, this status code is 200, the headers, which has different other properties, the card control, this is the value, the vary, this is that, and all the different options. Then this is the most important part that we use there, which is the body. So the content type of that that file, this is it, and the content is this. So this is in base 64, by the way. So, but this is the content of that file that's, we requested. So this is where this is represented. And every other thing that you probably see as well will be mostly in JSON format. If I go here now, so you see that everything here is also in JSON format and all of that. So if I go to even the create item and I click on the show raw outputs, so everything here now is also in JSON. So the body, which is this, the internal ID of that item that was created on SharePoint, the ID, the title, the description, this is it, the status, which is an object, now has multiple values, which is this, so data type, ID, value, and all of that. So we can already see that understanding this kind of is very important because it helps you to understand what is happening with your flow, right? It allows you to be able to extract data from your flow. For example, from this one, if I say, okay, I need you to write an expression that can pick out the status value or the editor email or whatever, there will be a way for you to kind of write that expression. But if you don't understand this, if you can't even read this, then it's very hard for you to even be able to write out the expression. So if I try to run this particular flow again, let's see what happens. So this API is just a test API that returns some random data. So, and if I come here now, we'll see all the random data. So it returns a body. So when you are returning a response from an API, it most likely will come with a body, which will now be in a specific format. Now, whenever you see this square brackets, that means the contents inside that square bracket is an array. So an array is a set of data. So an array can now have different, so like I mentioned, we already talked about the different data types, which are array, objects, string, numbers, Boolean, and null, right? So now in this case, this is an array. So whenever you see this square bracket, it means the output of that body is an array. Whenever you see a curly brace, it means it's an object, right? So an object is more like, just like the name implies, like it's more like an object. So which means everything inside that particular object now would have the different properties. So, for example, see these particular details now. This is an array of different people. So, which means like we can have everybody in this class now, and we have an array of everybody's details. So, Foyin, myself, and every other person in this place, everybody is our data is represented inside an array because we have like more than one record, right? Now, inside each of the record, we can now represent each person's details, unique information as an object. Now, which is where this object comes in. So now, so each of this now, you see that this is where the curly brace starts, and this is where it ends, right? Maybe I should actually put this inside. Okay. So let me bring this into VS Code. So we see. So now, this is an array of all the people, right? And then we have objects. So each person's record, this is where the brace starts and this is where it ends. So which means from here to here, this is an object. This other person, this is another object. This next one, this is another object, right? So, and so forth and so on. So now, inside each person's, which is represented as an object, we now have all the properties, right? So the first property of that person is ID, which is this, name, which is, so this is the property and this is the value of that property. So property value, property value, property value, right? So the property is a name. So the property is more like an attribute of that particular person. So each person now, for example, everybody has a name, everybody has an age, they have their address, their phone number. So each of those are different properties or attributes of that particular person. So see yourself as an object, right, in the first place, and then look at all the different properties that you now have. So one of them could be your name, like I said, your age, your date of birth, your address, your complexion, your state of origin, and and all of those things. So that's why we have this object, and then each object now has its different values, which is name, company, username, email, this, that, that, and we can see all of that. If I go to the next person now, all of these also have its own properties and values for this second person as well, and that's the same thing for almost everyone, right? So if I also go to this particular one, which is like the default Office 365 Visas Connector, we'll also see this coming in as well. So each person has their ID, their account enabled. So this account enabled is a Boolean. So this now, for example, is a string. So whenever it's a text, that's a string. Then account enabled, this is true. So which means it's either true or false. So it's either your account is enabled or it's not, right? Now, business phones. Now, so the way the structure also works is that inside an object, for example, inside a particular type of data, you can also have another data type inside. So for example, this is an array, starting with this. This is an array of all the people, right? And then inside that array, we now have different objects. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 objects here. Now, inside each of the objects, we have the different attributes, which is ID, this, account enabled. Now, this is, like I said, string, this is a Boolean. Now, inside this object, you can also have an array inside an object. You can have an object inside an array, and you can have an array inside an object as well. So even inside this array again, it could still even be nested to another object again. So it can keep on going on and being nested and nested as that. So now this is an array now. This is business phones. So this particular attribute now, because array is mostly like when it can be more than one value for that particular person. So we have this business phones, which is this. So you can see it's called business phones, right? And it can be more than one. So which means you can have more than one business phone. So in this case, it will be represented like as business phone this comma something, right? If it has more than one. So it will be this comma that. So all of those array will be represented that way. So display name, this is a string, obviously, because it's going to be text. So string can be combination of text and numbers. If it's a number, it can only be numbers. It won't have any it shouldn't have any text in it. So given name, all of these, those are strings, and that. And I don't know if we have any null. Okay, so now this, for example, is an empty array. So this is an array. So like I said, whenever you see square bracket, that's an array. Whenever you see the braces, this is the brace, it's an object. And then when you see it as true, so true or false would not be inside any double quote. So you say that these strings are inside the double quotes, but for true or false, which is a boolean, it will not be inside any of those things. So it must either be a true or a false. And so which means, for example, going back to around, let's say you have a field that is a boolean field and you are trying to update it, right? So let's say the value you are trying to update it with is neither true nor false, then that particular action will fail because it's only expecting any of those two inputs. Which other one have we not explained? So numbers, I don't think we have numbers here, but numbers can either be decimal or whole numbers. But yeah. So any questions so far, first of all? Or are we confused? Maybe we should start from there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Babatunde.
Okay.
My question would be for the authentication type for this HTTP, right?
Yeah.
What was the authentication type that you made use of? Since
Yeah, okay, good question. So now this action in Power Automate allows you to make an API calls to a particular endpoint. So this, like for example, is an endpoint. So most times, just for people who are not very familiar with API, so it's usually a URL which you can call and then it returns data to you, mostly in JSON formats if it's a REST API. So now let me open this URL here, for example. If I open this, so you see that those stuff that we were saying, so it's usually generating just random data. If I refresh it again, it will generate another set of random data, as you can see, right? But this is the way it looks. So you can see that this is an array and it has all the different objects, So this is just a test API with no authentication. So in some other cases, you might have an endpoint that requires you to authenticate before you can connect to it. So if I go to this, so you see that when I come here, show advanced option, we have authentication and we have the different basic client certificates, OAuth, raw, and depending on what type of authentication that is required by that API endpoint, then you can select whichever one. But this is just a free API with no authentication. So I'm just using this to test. So we can see that the authentication here is currently none. And when you're also making API calls, there are also different actions that you can take. So one of them is get, so which means just to retrieve, you are just trying to read from that what's it called now? That endpoint, right? I'm just trying to get data from it. Put is I'm trying to update that particular endpoint. Post is I'm trying to create a record. Patch and put are also quite similar. It's also trying to update, but it depends on what is required by that particular endpoint, which one of them is kind of supported, right? Then delete, of course, is trying to delete the record from that particular uh, endpoint. So let's say like I have access to delete data from here. Let's say it's not just a fake one, right? It's this real API that has real data, and I have access to delete and all of that. I can delete, I can post, which will allow me to create record inside that particular API, or patch that will update maybe an existing record, or puts and all of that. So yeah, so in that case as well, you might require that you put like a body or the headers that are required, especially when it's a post. Most time when it gets, you might not require the body, but when it's a post, it's requesting for, okay, what are you trying to post, or maybe if it's a patch as well, what are you trying to post, or what are you trying to patch, and all of those things. So does that answer
Okay.
your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. So,
Right.
could you please post the URL on the chat?
Okay,
So
for
just in case we
this
want to test.
API,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, sure.
yes.
Let me just drop that.
Then you're passing in the status code in the Office 365. No, this the one below, the search for user v2.
No, so this one is just a different. So I'm just using two different API endpoints now. So this is a default connector that exists already on Power App. So if I go to, so this one now, for example, is HTTP, the first one. So if you search for this HTTP, you'll see this HTTP, which is a premium connector. But there's also this Office 365 users, so which has different actions as well. So I'm just using this search for user, right? So this search for user will just search for users within your Office 365 tenant, right? And you can use the search term. So I'm just using this, for example. It could be like you are searching by their email address or whatever. So now, once I do that, this is going to return me the list of users matching my search criteria within my tenant, right? So which is what is happening here. So this is one is just, so they are two different, they are connecting to two different data. I'm just using both of them to explain. So in case you are trying to connect to maybe an external API that is not available, or you are trying to connect to one that already exists, or for example, I can even connect to, let's say I want to use get items, which is a default connector here as well. And I want to get, let's say, if you remember that our list for error logs, right? And I save this. So you see that when this is also returned, it's going to be returned in a JSON format. So let's run it and see. So everything that is returned like on PowerAutomate is always returned in JSON format, like I said. So if I come here, sometimes when the output is a bit large, it doesn't display, just say you should click to download, and then it opens in a new browser. But if I come here as well, you see that everything we are seeing here now is also in JSON format. So this is the body, these are the values, which is an array of data, and these are objects with different data, and I can see the tag, the ID, the title of that request. So you see that this is just the same data that we have here. If I come back here, so the title, the description, the status, everything that I have here, but is now represented in a different structured format called JSON. So the title, the description, so you see that it's the same description that I have here, the file request, which is the title, the date was modified. So all of those things also exist. So there are also additional fields that exist. So all this modified, created, ID, blah, blah, blah. So I'll see that we'll see that everything kind of exists here, and which is what is being returned. You can see all this modified everything ID is what we are just seeing here. The other, which is an object, um, the editor as well. So this is all of this now, for example. Yeah, okay, so good. We can see that there is a null here, for example. this null means that this particular user has no job title to their name. They don't have any department as well. This is the picture of the person. This is the email. So now we see that this is an array which has an object. So this particular, okay, let me bring it to VS Code once again. And let's see, it's more formatted. So from line 47 to line 95 now is actually, what's this? So these are the values. These are all the records, right? We have all the records that are coming from that list, that SharePoint list here. And then each of these objects is a record, right? Each of the object that you are seeing here. So for example, from this line 47 to 95, this is for a particular, all these attributes are for a particular record. From 96 to 144 is an attribute of another record. So for all the records, each of them are an object, right? Now, that particular record, which is the first one, for example, has all these attributes. It has this OData tag, it has this internal, this title, this author. So now you say that this is an object, but even in an object, you can have another object inside it. So for example, the author column is an object column. That's a person field. So it's an object on its own because it has more than one attribute. So for the person record, whenever the person's name or whatever is saved, let me go back here now. So like this created by, right? It's not just saving the name of the person, even though that's the only thing you can see, but it's an object which has more attributes. So that's why when you hover on it, you can see the person's email, you can see there are some other information about them, right? So if I come back to our VS Code, so we see that object now, that author, which is the created by, has this OData type. It has the claims, it has the person's display name, email, picture, the departments, this and that, job title. So all of those attributes is another object inside an object, right? And also like editor, this. So all of this now are still all attributes of one particular person, or of one particular record rather. So, but it's just represented in that format. So now let's say you want to pick a value from this. If I go to, let's say, compose, for example, you see that I have all the different. So if I want to say the description, so okay, apply to which is another action in PowerAutomate that allows you to perform the same set of actions on multiple records. So like get items now, you see that it's saying get items. So which means you can have more than one item on this particular list. So each record is called an item in SharePoint list, by the way. So which means for each of the action, I want to perform a particular action. So I can now put all the actions I want to perform. Maybe I want to update the name, or I want to do whatever it is, right? I can now do that inside my apply to which. So, but here now it's going to just return all the description one after the other. So it's going to just perform that sequentially for every record that I have that is returned in my get items, right? So let's just try this and see what it looks like. Okay, so you can see because we have 10 items on that list, it's also returning 10. So for each of them, it's just going to compose and write out what's the description in that items. So you can say that each of the description is different, right? So yeah, I think for starters, this should be enough. So I don't overwhelm you with all of the other complex stuff with Jason. But yeah, any other questions? I think I see a question in the chat. How do we create an error to capture someone submit an attendance sheet for this class twice in the same week? Okay, so yes, well, that would that's possible. I mean, it will necessarily not be an error per se. Or okay, let's say it's an error. So in that case, what you are going to do is you want to first check if that person's record already exists. So which means I'm not sure how you are creating your attendance. So let's say you are submitting it to a SharePoint list, right? And maybe you are creating from maybe from Microsoft Forms to SharePoint, and then whenever the person submits and you don't want the person to submit another one, right? So what you'll probably do is you need to first go and get items, right? So there's something called filter query here, where you can filter for specific records to say, okay, if where the data or whatever is equal to this. So let's say what you are using to identify that person is the person's email address, right? So you can say you should first go and check if there is any record in that on that list with that email address, right? So which means if there's a record already with that email address, it means there is a record that exists already for that person. So in that case, this array will return at least one record. So get items will always return an array, right? Okay. I don't know if we still have enough time, but let me see if I can just do a quick sample of that. So let's say we want to use the ID equals to 1, right? So filter query allows you to kind of filter down your records. So it only returns records that matches that particular condition rather than returning everything. So initially you see that this was returning like 10 records, right? In this case, it's going to return only one, as you can see, showing 1 of 1. So it means it only returns 1. So it's only returning the record where the ID is equal to 1. So the same way, you can also check to say where the email address or whatever the name of your column that you are checking with is equal to that person's email address, which should be coming from your trigger or something, right? So which means in that case, if there is a record, so here now we can also use our compose to get the length of our array. So let's say if you go to expression, there's something called length. Length is going to, for an array, to return how many items are in that array. So length of the get items now. So if we save this and run it again, we'll see the length. So which is 1. So we can say that it only return 1. So if it was more than 1, it will also be more than 1, right? So you can now have like a condition to say, okay, once all your condition has been met, you should check if this is equal to or greater than 0. So which means whenever it's greater than 0, that means there is already an existing record that matches that condition, right? So you can now say, okay, if it is yes, if it's greater than 0, which in that person already has a record, then you can put in your yes, you can say, okay, send an email to the person that you've already created your attendance for this week. This is a duplicate. But if it is no, you can now go ahead to do your normal action, which is creating that record or something like that. Don't know if that answers your question. So, okay, another question I see here is, what's the data type for status for the Power Automate error log in SharePoint? Yeah, so status, okay, just to briefly explain, when you are creating a SharePoint list, you have different data types. So text, for example, is a string. Choice is an object, and we can see this. So status, which is a choice in this case, it's actually an object. If I run this again, we'll see that. So status is an object. So like I said, how you easily recognize them again when you're looking at them is, so let's look for status. Oh, this one doesn't have the status. Let me look for under status. Okay, so if you look at this, you see that this status is actually an object. So this is status, but it has braces. You see that description is a string because it just has this text, but for status, it's an object which now has different attributes on its own. It has this data type, which is usually the same for every of them. ID might be different based on the number. So which is success is 0. If it's failure, it may be 1. Yeah, so you can see like failed now, the ID is 1. So we have status, we have the data type, we have ID, and we have the value, which is the actual text. So for status in this case, it's an object. Okay, do we have any more questions? I know this is probably a lot to take in, but yeah, I'm sure as you go along, you probably understand. Okay, Zainab.
Okay. So I just want to ask, what's the difference between, because I know we have get items and then get item. So
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
I don't know the difference between both of them.
Okay, good. Thank you for that question. So just like the name implies, get items is plural and get item is singular. Now for get items, you are getting multiple items, just like we saw the other time. This was just returning all the items, all the 10 items that I had on my list, right? Now for get item, I want to only return a single record. But for me to return that single record, I need to provide the ID of that record, right? So this one now is going to return, going back to our JSON, get item will return an object, get items will return an array, because get items is an array of multiple items, right? So it's going to return an array of objects. But for get item, it's going to return only one object. So let's put this now. So, but then for you to use get items, you don't need to know the ID of the items that you want to return. But for get item, you need to know the exact ID of that item there. So you see this, each record has its own unique ID, right? 1, 2, 3, and it's incremental like that. So for you to return the ID of, for you to return item using get item, which you only return the one record, you need to know the ID of the particular record you want to return. So if I put like 7 now, so which means this will return the item with status 7, with ID 7. So let's see now. So you can see that this is returning the record with ID 7 here. And it is an object. So you can see that the body, like I said, when you see it as a brace, it's an object. So it's going to return it as an object here, right? But if we go back to our get items, the body is going to be an array because it's returning. So you can see the body value So the value is an array of all the 10 items that we have in that list. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I think the last question here is for the error handling. Could you please show how you got the file path for the SharePoint list? So, or SharePoint library actually. Okay, let me just show that. So there's an action called get file content using path. So there are actually two actions. There's one called get file content that will require that you have the identifier of the file, but there's get file content using path, which will require that you know the path of the file that you are trying to return. So how we did this was so by default, let's say this one we are trying to create it dynamically, which is why we are putting the file name here just for demo purposes. So, but let's say there is a particular file that you always want to get. It's not as if the file you are getting is dynamic. If you go here, for example, you can go to whichever folder that you're going to write and select the file. So you see that this is going to have the file path, which is the name of the document library slash the file name. So if you go here, we'll see that the name of the document library is Power Platform Documents, and this is the file name. So by default, so it's just the path of the file, which is document library slash. So if there's a folder as well, let's say I have a folder here. And then I have a file inside this folder, right? Let me just drag in. So, and then I have this file inside this folder, right? If I go back to this place, so it's now going to be document library slash folder name slash file name, right? So Power Platform slash test slash the name of the file, right? So the most important one that you need to get is the name of the document library. So that needs to come first, then slash whatever the file path is for your where your file is located. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Okay, Foyin. Hello? I don't know if you are speaking. Can't hear you. Okay, while we are waiting for that. So
Could you please help me expand the set variable under the send an email? I'm trying to create a replica of what you
oh, okay, yeah. Definitely.
So you're passing details.
Yeah. Okay, so there's another question. Is it possible to move my flow to another environment? Yes, you can. So you can export your flow. So there's this option to say exports. So you come here and you say export as package zip. So you export that, you give it a name, and just copy and paste this name. And then create as new. So that it will create that flow as a new one rather than updating an existing one. So it downloads a zip file for you, right? So now, if you want to import it to another environment, all you need to do is same way, instead of exports, you are just going to use imports. So if we go to, let's say this is a different environment, right? So we have this option now, imports, and then select the file, the zip file. So remember the zip file that we just downloaded. Just go to our downloads and select this. So it's uploading, and then it will prompt you to select the connections. So the different data sources that you are connecting to, you need a particular account to connect to them. So like your SharePoint and Outlook that we're using there. So because I don't have an existing one on this environment, I'll just create a new connection for both my SharePoint and my Outlook.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Hello?
Yes. Once I want you to finish, then I'll go ahead.
Okay. So I've created for both my Office 365 Outlook and my SharePoint. So if I come here and refresh, then I can select this and save. I can select this and save as well, and then import. So it's a very similar concept of exporting and importing your Power Apps as well. So it has been imported successfully. I come here, I can open Flow. Yeah, you see, we have our Flow on the other environment as well now. So, and when you import it, most times it's always turned off, so you may need to turn it on. You are importing, so you can run it, and we'll say that it will behave the exact same way as the initial one. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question, Eunice.
Yes.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Babatunde. Please, I want to see our emojis go up for our amazing facilitator of today's class. I'm sure that if I give him 3 hours, we'll still be here talking about error handling and JSON and all of that. So that's why we brought him just to give you the introduction to error handling and JSON. And as you go along in your automation journey, you will continue to see why this is important. And if somebody says JSON to you now, or API call, or endpoints, you will not be like, I was that one again. At least you have a foundational understanding of what that is, and we can relate to that. So to wrap up today's class, we'll just do a quick overview of what we covered. We looked at PowerAutomate, what it is, what it's used for, the business value of it. We looked at just grab the screen. We identified the different type of power applications that we have. Power automates that we have. We have Cloudflow. We said in Cloudflow, you have instance, you have scheduled, you have automated. Then we also spoke about the desktop flows as well. that we can use for robotic process automation or more human type of automation, and also for legacy systems where there is no API call. We also explain different components of your PowerAutomate flow, like actions. We explain triggers. We built a basic flow, instant, scheduled, and automated. And we also looked at error handling and JSON. So these are all the things that we've done today.